Well, the federal election campaign has officially kicked off, and while we're going to be hearing a lot about how Canada plans to navigate a trade war with the United States, we already talked about Bloomberg's latest reporting on the confidence of Canadians starting to weaken when it comes to the economic outlook. So how will affordability find its place on the campaign trail, especially on the tax front, whether it's income taxes or carbon taxes? Jack Mintz is the president's fellow with the School of Public Policy at the University of Calgary, joins us now. Jack, what are your early observations from everything we've heard so far?
Well, I think, first of all, we seem to be obviously very concerned about the impact of tariffs on the Canadian economy. I think there's a little bit of too much crisis emphasis, in the sense that this is not like COVID in 2020 when we really had a major crisis that had to be dealt with. Tariffs are going to have a short-run impact on prices because they will raise probably consumer prices in this country. Even the ones that we've retaliated with will cause our prices to rise as well. And I think that we are going to have a softening in the economy, but it's not going to be a Great Depression, but it is something that we're going to have to be concerned about in terms of our growth. And I think it comes at a time where we've had really 10 years of almost a lost decade, where economic growth in terms of per capita growth has been almost stagnant over 10 years. And this is not good timing for us, but adjustment will happen, and we'll have to see where things go in the next while.
So it's an interesting point you make, because obviously we'll hear about affordability on the campaign trail. I guess it's the lens of affordability. Is it making things affordable in the short term, or is it providing affordability for Canadians through long-term planning? I mean, what are you going to be watching for in terms of some of these talking points that connect with voters?
Well, I think there's two aspects to the affordability issue. I mean, Canadians have just gone through a real good bout of inflation over the past few years, after the pandemic. And so they've been really stressed in terms of their budgets. Housing costs are up, and food prices are up, and et cetera. And so it's been a challenge, for Canadians. But the other side of it is our incomes. And when you start seeing falling incomes, which we may have over the next while, then it's just also raises an affordability problem. And I think Canadians are in no mood for tax increases. In fact, they would like to see some tax reductions. And so the parties are responding. They're cutting carbon taxes. Well, at least there's a question of whether the Liberals, they are going to, promise to cut the fuel charge, which raises the price of gasoline and diesel, and sometimes called the consumer tax, although it's mislabeled a consumer tax because every business also that are low emitters pay it. But then there's the so-called industrial carbon tax, which now the Conservatives said they're going to cancel. We also see that the Liberals today promised a 1-point reduction in the lowest personal tax rate. But the Conservatives are going one step further and are promising a 2.25 percentage point reduction in the low personal tax rate. And I think this reflects the fact that people are concerned about affordability and their budgets, and they want to have more room to spend. So it is already being a major issue in this campaign.
I also want to talk about fiscal tensions, which we see playing out in the United States, where obviously you've got a lot of aggressive action from the Trump administration to deal with deficit issues, and obviously a lot of backlash to those strategies because of the approach that's been taken. But it was interesting to me to see some comments from Scotiabank's economics team saying this week, quote, "Canadians are hardly preoccupied with the federal deficit right now, as affordability, trade tensions, and healthcare dominate minds and hearts." But one could argue, if you went back like a year ago, we were talking a little bit more about the fiscal picture in this country. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that when you're starting to face kind of potential downturn in the economy, I think at this point, voters tend to be more worried about the economy and are not as concerned about deficits. And so I noticed in the polls deficits are way down in the poll. But of course, we have to remember that eventually those deficits are going to mean more debt undertaken by governments. Canada's gross debt rate now, as a share of GDP, is now over 100%. We haven't seen that for almost 30 years. But with higher interest rates and inflation is going to contribute to maintaining those interest rates to some extent at a level that we are going to see that government spending will be taken up more and more with interest payments over time, and it squeezes out private sector investment as well. So we do have to worry about the deficit and the size of the debt over time. But right now it's obviously a low priority for Canadians, but it doesn't mean that the issue is going to go away.
Real quickly, we're almost out of time, but Bloomberg is now reporting from a White House official that the Trump administration has not made a final decision on its April 2nd tariff announcement and is still weighing whether sector-specific tariffs will be included. I only bring that up, Jack, because the market this morning was rallying on the idea that maybe there was a change in thinking in the White House. If we continue to see this back and forth, ultimately, what do you think that means for the message that shines through with the Canadian campaign?
Well, I think it's certainly going to have an impact on the campaign to some extent. And of course, what people are going to be looking for is what strategy Canada's going to take if tariffs do come on. I read the Wall Street Journal this morning, and they had a somewhat different take. They did say that there may be focus on reciprocal tariffs only, which sounds like it may not be limited, but it's still talked about potentially. For example, tariffs on automobiles, automobiles and parts from Canada, and that actually could have a very significant impact on, especially the Ontario economy. And so I think we're going to have to see exactly what happens. But all this uncertainty is creating a lot of problems for businesses. They're holding back. They're waiting to see what to do, and in some cases, they're already shipping goods as fast down to the United States as they can to avoid any immediate impact of tariffs. But we're in for a ride for a while, I think, and I have to remember that we certainly need to worry about the fact that some of these tariffs may be more longer lasting than we would think.
Okay, Jack.